Hi, and welcome to a Small Medium at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you an intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. Let me tell you a little bit about our special guest today. Today we have Jeffrey Heilman, who is a father, writer, and musician who has written and recorded over 200 songs. He was a skateboarder and snowboarder in his teenage years, and he started playing guitar, writing songs, playing in bands, and experimenting with alcohol and drugs. By 19, after receiving opioid pain medications for 5 years for the injuries he received in the activities that he had, he became addicted to opioids. He sold cannabis then and spent his first time in jail for selling it. This led to a future of substance abuse and armed robbery to support his habit. By the age of 30, Jeff landed in prison for 3 years for armed robbery. During his time in prison, he discovered Buddhist psychology, mindfulness meditation, and Lakota sweat lodge ceremony. Jeffrey started voraciously reading ancient Taoist, Buddhist, and Vedic texts, as well as existential, environmental, and spiritual, philosophical, and psychological texts. Towards the end of his stay in prison, he began reading books in quantum theory and the paranormal. Before he was released from prison in 2016, he read over 300 books on the above mentioned subjects and established a solid spiritual practice rooted in Lakota ceremony, Buddhist meditation, and Taoist philosophy. In 2019, 2 years out of prison, Jeff earned his Associate of Science degree from Portland Community College. In 2022, he earned his Bachelor of Science degree from the University Honors College of Portland State University, with a major in psychology and a minor in anthropology. With the guidance of Dr. Stanley Krippner, Jeff's thesis on the history, legalization, and potentials of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy was published in the 2023 Journal of Scientific Exploration. Excuse me. In 2021, Jeff attended his first Vision Quest and Sacred Lakota Sundance ceremony in South Dakota. In 2022, after receiving a vision, he then participated in the Sundance ceremony. In 2025, Jeff has completed his fourth Sundance ceremony in South Dakota. In 2025, Jeff received a master's degree in psychology as well as a certification as a spiritual counselor at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. This year, he also started a nonprofit organization called Conscious Effort Awareness Development Services, or CEDAS. Jeff is currently working with his business partner, Lakota cultural healer, teacher, medicine man, and horse therapist, Douglas Widow Jr. Lakota cultural equine horse therapy and facilitating Lakota cultural equine horse therapy retreats. Jeff is currently writing a series of books on these subjects. Let's welcome Jeff here today. Hi, Jeff. Welcome.
Hello, Gail. So good to see you.
Good to
Thanks for
see you, and just happy we met at Stanley Krippner's, and all the wonderful people that Stanley keeps bringing together all around the world. He's an amazing human being.
absolutely.
So I'm going to start you off with the question I ask all my guests on the first time they're on the show, is if you could just tell us a little bit, we don't have to go into intense detail, but where you grew up and what your family and childhood was like, and was any of it supporting, did you grow up with horses or spiritual retreats, or what your family was like in your life growing up as a child?
Sure. Well, I was born in Baker City, Oregon, which is a very small Eastern Oregon town, about 300 miles east of Portland. Both of my parents were from Eastern Oregon. My mother from Baker City, and my father actually from Joseph, Oregon. And so they were kind of the first of our ancestral line to move to the big city, and that's I'm the one that came out of that along with my older brothers. So grew up in a small suburb of Portland, southeast Portland, called Milwaukee, Oregon. And so I got, the city experience of growing up and going to school and having friendships, things like that, but was able to, as my family had a strong connection with their parents, my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, a lot of vacations and time spent driving on 84 through the Columbia River Gorge out to Baker City, and then also to my grandparents' farm on in Joseph, Oregon, and time in Wallowa Lake up there, beautiful country, Nimipu, the Nez Perce country up there, land of Chief Joseph. So there was quite a bit of experiencing the wilderness out in Eastern Oregon and all that majestic power and beauty out there, but then also seeing what it was like to be in a developing, city such as Portland of what it is now. It's like seems like Portland's getting its day. I wouldn't so say in the sun, but
Right.
it's getting recognized.
Well, that's
Um,
nice that you got to grow up both with nature and with the things that a city has to offer. So your
yes,
family gave you a nice rounded exposure that way.
yes, that it was very good. And as I can remember now of what I'm into now, I didn't have a background with horses too specifically. I had one aunt that was that had grew up on the farm in Joseph that I remember the name of her horse was Tin, and she loved her horse, and I got to ride Tin a couple times, only on one vacation up there, but immediately got on Tin, and we went riding through the pasture of my grandparents' farm, and so that was amazing. But the background that I grew up in, spiritually or religiously, really from a small town Eastern Oregon of European, descended culture, it was an organized Christianity, religion, and of course that led me directly into punk rock and anti-authority and anti-religion ethics, in grade school. And I started giving a middle finger to the government, to religions, my parents, everybody, at that early age, trying to figure these things out. And at this point, it's nice that it's reconciled back into the realms of mysticism, spirituality, and you could say religion, but not in the way that we perceive religion as in the Orthodox way, because I gave that up, just was horrified and angry about it, but through the ways of the divine, able to come back full circle and have a little bit more of a mature understanding and connection with the divine.
Wonderful. So it sounds like you had you grew up with a good family.
Yes,
Sounds like
yes.
you had a nice, good family, solid background. So tell us about your experiences with substance abuse and landing you in prison, what that was like for you, and were you in a state prison, a federal prison, or were you somewhere? We've had a few guests recently, and so I'm learning more about the differences of state prisons and federal prisons and the things that go on and the difficulties. And I've been learning a lot about that. I meditate on Sunday with a group that I had as podcast guests, so I'm wondering if you could share some of that on your personal experience of what this was like.
Sure, sure. And through, as I was saying, getting into punk rock and playing music, skateboarding, and just being the wild child, I'm definitely, the black sheep of the family, the contrary, whatever you want to call it. That got me into drugs. I mean, that's what all the media and the music was about in the 90s. Nirvana was the one that birthed me into the music, and but going through the substances such as alcohol, marijuana, and then what it turned me on at 14, of course, was psilocybin mushrooms and then LSD. But after, and that was an adolescence, so getting to the point of coming out of adolescence and seeing what the world really consisted of, and not having a strong foundation in that reality got me very, very depressed and upset at the state of things. It correlates with punk rock a lot, to where punk rock kind of just is upset at the system, but they don't necessarily see a way through it and out of it. It's more of just complaining, and that's I'll get
Hmm.
to later, where the Buddhist aspects come in with that. But through my skateboarding and snowboarding and injuries, that came the opioid painkillers, and that was a part of that during the later 90s, and the FDA kind of epidemic of opioid painkillers and OxyContin in 2004. There were people that we knew, there was friends that had mothers that would sell us marijuana and say, hey, do you want 100 milligram morphine with that for $7? It's like, sure, let's throw that down the gullet and see what happens.
Oh, God.
Very soon after that came into what I had found to be a real addiction that's can look back and say those were bona fide hell realms. Being addicted and the withdrawals, trying to get off of those, and all the mistakes caused in the route of justifying, well, if I just get well, I'll make things work. But by the time you get well, you're out in la la land, and then you're coming down again, and you're chasing your tail. And so, not to get too much into the story of throughout my 20s, it was really at 19, 20 years old that I found myself like a servant to my dependence on opioids. And that accelerated through my 20s. A lot of Oxycontin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, methadone, heroin at times, and really through all of that towards my later 20s, I made it past the 27, which is good. I didn't become a forever 27, thank goodness. That
Right.
seems to be a part where your full brain development happens, and being able to make it past that's when I started going into rehabs on my own volition, not because I was forced to by the law for just stupid town drunkard stuff that I did in my 20s. And so by the age of 30, after I'd gone to a couple inpatient rehabilitation centers and just couldn't feel good. I remember being out of inpatient for 4 months when I was very hard determined and resolved to stop with that, but I just felt terrible. I couldn't feel fresh again. I thought that, I just done irreparable damage to myself, and that
Would it be fair to say then that some of the places you reached out to weren't actually the right help that you needed?
at the time it was a mixture of my own, and not understanding, the how long it takes for the body to regenerate, for the body, the mind, the soul, the spirit, for spirit loss or spirit sickness to be restored. And
Mhm.
that's a huge part of, I think, that what we're getting to now is that a lot of the rehabilitation centers don't target on spirit. They don't target on these, spirit sickness, soul loss, these types of things. It's more just like, you're an idiot. Why are you doing this? Stop doing
Right.
it. Go back out into this grim world and go get a job and make something of yourself. And it's just kind of like, if that's how it is, I'd rather use. And so at 4 months clean, I thought I would never be, feel good again. And I remember telling myself, that if that's how it is, then I'd rather be using and at least get some joy out of life. And I remember that when I relapsed, I had got a hold of a friend and got some methadone, and threw some methadone pills down the throat, and got off a bus, and a huge lightning storm happened, and it was just like, oh shit, this is eerie. Uh-oh, I think I just did something wrong, but paradoxically got off, and the hail's coming down. This is in Milwaukee, and I walked back home, and this was where I got a concept for one of the books I'm putting together called After Rehab Before Prison, because there was a 1 year from when I got out of that 38-day stay in rehab, which was up in Washington. It was a beautiful experience, and they definitely had the right interest at heart, but they just did not incorporate the things that I needed to be able to know that there's hope and answers with that. And so through that, it took me a year from getting released out of rehab to relapsing in the giant thunder and lightning storm, and all these mistakes happening, to where I had gone on a bender for about 4 days while I was working a marble and granite job, and I was out of town. Was able to hide what I was doing from my friends, my family, my children, my girlfriend at the time, and I went really deep back into it. And what had happened was I had found myself after a 4-day bender doing all sorts of drugs, smoking crack, doing a bunch of benzodiazepines, Valium and Klonopin and morphine, some heroin, some
Oh my
Oxycontin,
God.
and woke up after this 4-day bender, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was the fog came out, and then I became myself again, and I was, oh shit, what have I done? I don't have any money. I'm gonna be dope sick as all hell. It was terrifying, and I can say that this is probably the only legitimate channeled message I could say that I've had, which does not sound like what you get from God Almighty. But I was sitting there and said, I don't want this life anymore. I want to get out of it. I don't know how. I've already been to rehabs. I've been to jail. I got a message that said, go rob a convenience store and do it before you lose your nerve. And so I just said, okay. And so I ended up was in my friend's girlfriend's car at the time, and looked to see what resources I had to pull off this caper. and my friend's girlfriend had a bright orange towel in the back of her seat and a bunch of giant women's sunglasses. So I had put this bright orange towel around my head and put women's sunglasses on. And for some reason, I was like, "Oh, take your shoes off because they'll track you back by your shoes somehow." I was not in the right mind.
Right, right.
And had gone into a convenience store, and since I was working marble and granite, I always had a box knife in my pocket. And so I had parked the car on the side of the road, and on the side of the convenience store, and went inside the convenience store, walked in with the bright orange towel, huge glasses, no shoes on. I mean, talk about cosmic clown. Walked up to the register and had pulled out the box knife and flipped it back and said, "It's not personal. I just need the money." The woman who was behind plastic glass, had opened the register, stepped back. I grabbed the money and went out, and it got picked up about 3 hours later after the police had tracked down the car, and found me looking. They were looking in the apartment that I was in, and I hadn't planned it through. I'm not of criminal mind. I'm just an idiot. But the best kind of idiot, I guess, because it's gotten me here. I was
Right.
wearing the same shirt that was in the video, the police the surveillance video. And so getting that, then I woke up in an interrogation room with the police and was looking at 10 years. And it was like, most I'd ever done at that time was 30 days in jail for a DUI. And I was just like, holy shit, 10 years. That was terrifying. And so ended up going in, and from 7 months that I spent in county, at Clackamas County, that was just kind of being in an intermediary zone, not knowing what was happening. I was sentenced to a 4-year sentence in prison. And from then, since the prison system is so crowded, they sent me, after getting the intake, which you get an intake, you go to the intake center, which is Coffee Creek in Wilsonville, Oregon. And you stay there for 30 days while they give you all the psychological tests, which is funny, those psychological tests were made by Timothy Leary. So,
In fact, when Timothy Leary was a friend of my husband, so I
mhm,
got to know him towards the last 2 years of his life.
mm,
And the first night that I met him, we drove him back to his house in Beverly Hills, and we sat on his couch, and he was showing us a magazine that had an actual photo of the cell that he had been in. That was a picture of it. And he was showing it to us, and he told us about all the positive things of being in prison and what it did for him. And then he mentioned to us, and yeah, he said, I got in minimum security prison because I was the one who wrote the questions that I was answering on the test.
yep, yep,
So I obviously knew how to answer them since I wrote it.
yeah, yeah.
I
See,
had
yeah,
anyways, he was quite the guy. And him and my dad were the first two men that I'd ever heard such a positive thing from, that both him and my dad said prison was one of the best experiences of their life, and that it changed them in very positive ways. And of course, they did have the option of becoming more criminal if they wanted, but that's not what happened. They went the other route. But my dad
hmm,
was in Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, and my grandfather was in Sing Sing Penitentiary.
yeah,
So I've heard lots of prison stories growing up through the years.
yeah, I bet you have. Yeah, and at the time, I didn't know that Timothy Leary had written those, but that's I got put into a minimum security as well. Not that I knew the answers to them, it's just I was freaked out, and that was the only felony I'd committed. I was dependent and addicted and a wild person, but I was more into the sex, drugs, and rock and roll and wild life,
Right.
other than being a criminal about it. So I think that's why, my message said, go rob a convenience store, get yourself out of this and give yourself some time to heal. And this is the only way it's going to happen. And I can attest, just like your father and Tim, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. But that's not because of the existing forces at be or how they could have done it. It's because that was the first time in my life I could make decisions for myself to make myself better without pressure from any outside sources. There's nothing in there that I wanted to get into, all the criminality. It's just what I dove into was meditation. And when I was in, I was kind of like, I don't want anything to do with all this. I had been introduced to a meditation when I had gotten out of rehab. Didn't follow through with it because I was out on my own trying to do what everybody was telling me I needed to do to appease them. But once I was locked down, I was actually in the intake center where it was a 23-hour lockdown. I was in a cell for 30 days for 23 hours at a time, and gotten a hold of a couple books by Noah Levine, which he was a CIS alumni. He started refuge recovery. I know that there's some controversy that had happened with him, but other than that, he wrote a book called Dharma Punks, which is about going through the punk rock lifestyle and
Hmm.
being completely fed up with how the things are and getting into substances, getting locked up, and finding meditation as a way to bridge the gap from finding answers with that. And as what I had found, through reading his other a second book of his, which was Against the Stream. It's a Buddhist psychology manual. And it had some meditations that are straight from the Theravadan tradition of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And just kind of reading in his story and the name of the book, Against the Stream, as it is, I mean, it's a very contrary book. Buddhism is to go against the stream of mainstream human culture. And so, with that, I was able to find a way to get my mind to be able to ground and then be able to separate it and be able to watch the thought process and choose the decisions that I want to make instead of just getting carried away by it.
Hmm.
And with that meditation, that's the first thing that really started sparked me on it was like, I'm not buying drugs in prison. I'm going to end up being somebody's no thank you,
Smart move.
So with meditation, it hit something with my mind that reminded me very much of psychedelics that I experienced when I was 14 years old and through before I got to that depression state of the reality of human culture and how fast the current and the stream of human culture goes towards deception, dishonesty, exploiting people, and finding this guy that reading about his story, Siddhartha Gautama. Anyhow, I found he's the most amazing punk rocker of all, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And
Mm.
but instead of just destroying yourself with experiences and drugs and hating the government and culture, you find a way to get past it and go against it and realize that there is solutions to finding this, and there's things to work with, and there's ways to change it. And even to quote Michael Jackson, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. It's like I found out that was possible. It wasn't just some strange pop song or how everybody talks about it. And through the meditation and reading about that, I pretty much turned my 3-year prison sentence, which I ended up doing 3 years instead of 4, through being able to get into an alternative incarceration program, which was an inpatient rehab inside of prison. It saved me like 5 or 6 months off of my sentence, and then I was able to get a few months off for good behavior because I wasn't getting into anything. If I would have had a Buddhist robe, I would have worn that in prison. Turned it into a monastery, and through that, it started with the mindfulness of being able to see, oh my gosh, I have a very overactive mind, a diagnosed ADD, and it's like in culture and society, especially growing up, it's like you're faulty, you have faults in how you do it, but it's like it's a fire hose of thoughts and ideas and energy coming through. And with the meditation, being able to slow it down and see what's happening and the best possible choices to be able to relate to and carry those out into actions. That's what had really inspired me by Buddhism. And
So was the in prison was it the chapel where you were able to find all these things, or was it the library, or how did you gain access to hundreds of books on the paranormal, spirituality, Buddhism? Because I thought a lot of this was not allowed or kept in prison. So I'm wondering, was that all available to you, or did people give you the books, or
Sure. Yeah. This comes back to my parents, my family.
ah, wonderful.
Although raised and being the awkward black sheep, you need to go to church. Orthodox Christianity is their love shined through in my father sending me 3 books at a time every other week. But what had happened was once I got into these books, that's the initial one by Noah Levine, Dharma Punks. it suggested reading in the back. And then when you're reading through all these books, they're mentioning their path, and I'm like writing that down because I had nothing else to do. It's just like that's why he put me there, and it's
Yes.
like I started making lists, and then I would talk to my father, and he would send me books. He put money on my books as well, and then I had gotten involved when I was in Snake River minimum, which I was not a federal case. Federal would have been involved in gangs, or if like the Native Americans that they get involved because they are federally on a reservation. But
Oh,
for a lot of it, they'll get into federal stuff. Mine, which was great to be able to tell people in there too. It's like I wasn't working with a crew of people. I didn't have any. There was nobody to snitch on. Just me and myself,
right.
totally sabotaging my life, and I'm here doing my own time. No thanks. I don't want to get clicked up, and just that blind respect towards people, even though I was courted like the belle of the ball with every single prison, gang. I was just like, no, I'm doing my own thing. That gave a lot of respect and kept me out of any trouble or any sort of predatory nature from people while I was in there.
And at 30, did you have any children then when you went to prison?
Yes, I had both of my kiddos were 6 and 10 years old at that time, and that was the one of the most difficult things I could ever remember. Is having to tell my kiddos that I'm not coming home, and because I'd put it off, hoping that since I hadn't done any real crime or had a felony, I was hoping that I may get out on rehab, but as it turns out, when you commit armed robbery, that's not a choice, not an option. I really went for the gusto on that, and it's again, I couldn't, I couldn't slip the noose. Like I had to go to what I consider, and going through the Tibetan Book of the Dead in the 11th chapter, I really was in the Bardos. I was dead to the world, and I was in a world of demons, and I
Mm-hmm.
had to go and look at the light and find the light, which I did in Buddhism. But then through that as well, I met a Native American fellow, a good friend of mine. His name's Benjamin Moda, who had been in there for quite some time. And he had saw me playing guitar. I had a guitar when I was in prison, and he wanted to play music with me. And so I kind of put that off for a while because it's difficult to make connections with people and then to sever them if things don't work out. It's like I don't want to see you anymore. Then you turn around 5 feet and go to your cell, and they're just sitting there and there's being like, you son of a bitch. It's just like shit, it's like I just need to be. But after getting to know him a little bit, we sat down. He was an amazing guitar player. We were exchanging books. We were playing my songs. We were playing songs on the yard for people, where people would just light up and just get around us, and then actually started playing formal concerts on the yards that I was at, which Oregon State Penitentiary was the first one I went to, and I did a show there, and then was up to Snake River Minimum in Ontario, Oregon, and then transferred over to Powder River, which is in Baker City, where I did AIP, and then I was released out of the prison gates there. I did a few shows there, and that's where I did my first sweat. Was my brother Ben had gotten transferred over to Powder River, and he, after 2 years, of knowing him and playing music with him and exchanging the best, I mean, the best spiritual dialogue with this man. He was in his 40s, I was in my 30s. He was like an elder, but a brother to me. He was about to get released, and he said, because I would see once a month all these natives going out onto the yard on a weekend and getting into what looked like a jungle gym made out of wood sticks. This was the Inipi, later I'd find out,
And
and
this is at the prison yard.
at the prison yard. Yeah,
I'm very shocked that they allow this. I heard about this from my other prison inmates that they allowed sweat lodges, and I was very surprised because he said when he started going to the state California prisons, he could not find anything on Buddhism, any books, anything. He said, but you could have a sweat lodge.
mm,
So he was very shocked that all these other cultures and religions were represented at the chapel, but Buddhism wasn't. And so he spent the next 15 years getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books into the California state prisons so that there could be Buddhism and mindful meditation and things that they could read that had never been there before.
Wonderful. That's great work. And if I owe him any for that, I thank him very much because it's really strange in how I think about it and have done the research on the history of these things as well. It seems like when you get to that darkest place, that's where you can bring out the sacred. And this is actually why Native American ceremony was made legal again, was through a man that was in prison. This was in 1978. This is
Oh,
since 1640, since the Roman Catholic Church had abolished all spirit-based, earth-based practices. This includes, which I speak about in my psilocybin article, that was abolished in the 17th century, and it completely made it illegal. And that had to do with as well the Native American ceremonies, even sweat lodges, even their language. They were not allowed to. They could be, and if they were caught doing Sundance, like they could be hung and killed. There was many people that would go and do this. Is where the term Hidden Valley comes from, out in South Dakota, out there. There's a lot of little hidden valleys down in there where they would practice illegally Sundance down there to do those things, but it was not made legal again for them to practice this until a man was in prison in 1978 and saw that every other religion had been represented, and so he wrote to the government to allow that to happen, and it got passed through to where they allowed sweat ceremonies to happen in prisons. And since that happened, the ripple effects allowed all native ceremonies to become legal again for the first time since 1640. So it
I
wasn't.
I actually saw a little bit of what you're talking about when I went to Mongolia,
Mm,
because in Mongolia, shamanism, they killed you. So all the Buddhist monks were killed, and anyone that was a shaman was killed. So
mhm,
everything became underground. And the different, I think it was China and Russia, is it? Were the two countries that had taken over Mongolia at different times. And so the people that would practice shamanism would do it in the woods, hidden in secrecy. I
mhm,
went there in 2006. It had only been like 15 years or something that the country was free, or something. I'm never good exactly on the timing,
sure, sure.
but I was a guest of a Mongolian shaman there, Zoritz Batar, and I stayed with him and his family. And when we would go out in the street and he'd be in his full Mongolian shaman regalia, the local people would come rushing to him from wherever we would be going, in the littlest village or in the capital, because it was like, oh, so wonderful that to be able to approach again. And it had been, kept hidden and kept, and people and other countries also, like, I don't know if it was Peru or some other countries, where if they found you were a shaman, they killed you. And by wiping out this, they're wiping out information that's can save and help and heal people.
Yeah.
So I really understand this, and I'm so glad to hear that somebody stood up and brought this back, which brings me to a question. I have two questions here for you. I have a bunch of questions, but
Sure,
two of
sure.
them have to do with the Sweat Lodge and the Sundance. So we can answer them separately or together, whichever way you like. But I'm wondering if you could explain what I've never been to a sweat lodge, and I've never been
Mm.
invited to one. I just was imagining, is this like going in a sauna, or is this, what exactly happens in the sweat lodge, how it's created, and how do you get invited to a sweat lodge?
Well, you are now officially invited, Gail. We would love
Oh,
to have you at a sweat lodge. Me and Douglas, which I know that you've met now. He puts on the sweat lodges, and I'm being trained to do that when the time comes, when it's right. That's not something you want to just kind of jump into. But the sweat lodge, when I was in prison. It opened up a whole new world, and we can get into later how I got on to and work with Douglas. But what I've come to realize about the sweat lodge is it's what it brings in is all of the very crucial elements involved in alchemy. If you want to bring it into that, it brings in the fire, the air, the earth, the water, and
oh,
with those, it all coalesces to bring in the sacred. When you just in prison going, man, thanks for inviting me to this sweat ceremony, because my friend Ben, after knowing him for 2 years, and playing music, and I saw them going out to go do these things. I wanted to ask, but I knew that was overstepping my bounds. At the
Hmm.
time, all that I knew was that I was from European descent, which I've found now that I'm actually an eighth Cherokee and an eighth Flathead native. So it's kind of like, get it. I understand why I so badly wanted to, but he had invited me after 2 years before he had gotten out to join him to go into Sweat Lodge. And so when I was in Powder River correctional facility for the last 9 months of my sentence. I was able to do one once a month before getting released. And going in, how Sweat Lodge is put together, is that the willows that you pick, that you it's all put together through sacred geometry to the directions, the four directions of northeast, southwest. And with the Lakota, usually the west is where the door is. The west is kind of like the abyss, the void, where everything comes from and goes back to. And so the mythology, I guess, or how you want to look at it, is it's the womb of Mother Earth. The Sweat Lodge is the womb of Mother Earth. You cover it after it's put together, after you pray, putting it together, and it's there. You have a pit in the middle of this circle. It's a circle, and it's covered, and in the middle is where the rocks go. And so what you do is you pray over the rocks. You have a fire that comes straight out the door, and the fire is there, and you have wood, of course, there, and you get stones, of which, yeah, I've by now, we go and collect them out in South Dakota. I sweat for quite a few years in Mount Shasta. I actually go up to the mountain to get the flesh of Mount Shasta, Grandmother Shasta, and get the stones. And you do that usually, 28 stones each round, of which you have 4 rounds, is represented by 7 stones. For this, the number 7 is the sacred number for not
Say,
just the four directions, but then you have northeast, southwest, which is 4, and then you have grandfather sky, and then you have grandmother earth, and then you have great spirit, which is your heart. And so that's the 7 sacred directions that you bring in. 7 stones for each lodge, or each round of the lodge that you do. But you build the fire, you put the stones while you pray to each direction for the first 7 stones. So you're invoking the Great Spirit, Wankantonka Tankashila, and you build the wood on top of the stones, and then you light it, and it's lit for probably about an hour, maybe 2 at the most. And by that time, Grandmother Earth and the ancestors, the Tankashilas, the grandfathers, the stones, those are the ancient ones who've been here for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, get reignited, light back up. These stones turn bright orange, red. And then once the stones are ready and the medicine man or the water pourer says, let's go, everybody gets in the lodge. And of course, in prison, it was just a bunch of dudes. But when you're out, the women go in first, and they take up one side, and then the men are on the other side. And you're in there, and the fire tender who watches over the stones watches the fire. People will put a tobacco blessing onto the stones with tobacco, and into your left hand, because your left hand is closest to your heart, and left represents giving. And so you'll pray, and that tobacco will absorb your prayers, and you give it to the stones, and you pray for whatever you're looking for. You pray to the ancestors, and then they bring in 7 stones at a time into the lodge, into the middle. And once you get inside, you close the door, and it becomes pure darkness, except for those stones in the middle, and where the medicine man or the water pour will put medicines on the stones, which that's the earth element, which will either be sage or cedar or lavender or whatever type of medicines they would like to use. And then they invoke the spirits, and they pour water on it. And just like, as you know, a sauna or whatnot, it gets very hot. It gets hot. And so by earth, air, water, and fire, those stones bring out all of that spirit. And that's where the spirits come in. The ancestors come into the womb of Mother Earth, and they're able to doctor you. They're able to hear your prayers. And that's pretty much what a sweat lodge consists of. I could go into more detail about it, but that may be
and
too.
is there, since I've always wanted to do this, I have to ask a few
Oh,
questions.
yeah, no, go right ahead.
Okay. Is there, when you're in the pitch black darkness, you have the glowing of either the stone, Is it smoke filled inside there, or is it not so smoky? Or and is it like my sauna? It's 212 degrees. How
Mhm.
many degrees do you think it is inside of a sweat lodge?
So, I mean, it can get pretty hot depending on who is pouring the water, because the more water that you pour on it, the more heat it comes out of it. And it does get
Mm.
very steamy. And the medicine man or whoever is helping to conduct the ceremony will put medicines on the rocks, which will create some smoke. But that you don't want to put so much on there that you can't breathe. I mean, and this is also where it gets strange with these things, because when you're inside of the womb of the earth with those, some people report it to be very hot. Some people are like, I didn't feel a thing. It's kind of like the heat
Wow.
comes to who needs it, but of course, if you pour more water on the stones, it will get hotter, especially when the stones are first brought in. And depending on who, because some medicine men will bring in different amounts of stones at the time. They're really getting their messages from spirit, their guides, to do what needs to be done. And they know who's there and what needs to happen. So inside it can get pretty hot. But then again, just being able to pray, and what happens, which is strange, is when you sing or you pray, or if you have a drum or a rattle, it's very much like, I could say, being in prison and having that anxiety, that pressure, and then finding meditation to be able to be like, okay, everything's all right. Once you start singing or praying or playing that rattle, you're completely okay. It goes away. You're getting that pressure out. It's almost like being in a cocoon, but dealing with that pressure, kind of like the mythology of the caterpillar to the chrysalis, the cocoon, and out to a butterfly. You have to deal with your own suffering in there to be able to be reborn. So
Right.
it gets hot. You try to keep the smoke down, but then again, this is something we always tell people too. If it's too uncomfortable and you get claustrophobic or anything like that, you're not trapped in there. All you do is you say door, and we'll open the door, and then you can run out if you want, and you're not going to get cursed by the gods or anything. You can leave if you physically feel like you're having trouble. It's
And how
funny
much
though.
time is usually, and I assume whoever is in control of the stones, are they the one that also says, okay, now the ceremony is over? Or is it usually something that goes on for hours and hours, or is it something that goes on for an hour, or depends on, and is there 10 people? Like in prison, how many people did you have inside the sweat lodge?
There was quite a few. I mean, and it's like not anybody could just go into the lodge. You had to be native or invited by a native. And
Ah,
like my brother Ben is the one who was my kind of divine guide in being able to get me in there, because he brought me this big 6'2" white looking dude, and Ben, he's like 5'5", long hair, and everybody's like, what are you doing bringing this white man in here? He's like, hey, no, no, you guys look, this man has a good heart. And it brought
oh,
tears to my eyes in there. He deserves to be here. And if any of you have a problem, I'm not looking to start trouble, but you come talk to me, all right? And they said, okay, we'll give him 2 weeks, and
I was
see,
wondering how they
you
took
know.
you in. Okay, now
Yeah,
that.
and then, after getting to know me for like 2 days, they're just like, ah, Cola, brother, yeah, get it. Right on, and it's just like, so, but all of them and their brothers that they had, it was like we were packed like shoulder to shoulder. There's probably 20, 30 guys in this tiny little lodge. I mean, it was like a clown
Wow.
car, with all these people coming out at the end. It's like, how did
Right,
you get that many people in there? Because we all needed it, we all needed
right.
it. And then out here, you can do that as well. It depends on how big the lodge is. There's a lot of people that can fit in there. You get in, and it just seems time and space, disappears when you're in there. But
Hmm.
as the rounds go, usually as the numbers go, you want to sing 4 songs each round, but also you'll pray, and some medicine men will hand off the prayers to people. And the two medicine men that I work with, Douglas and Willis Dixon Jr., and good brother of mine out in South Dakota, he's my Sundance leader. And he is not about glib talking. He doesn't want you to be praying to every ailment you have, or every goddess that you've ever contacted. Just pray what's important. It's just like, and that's really what it comes down to. It's not a
Hmm.
theatrical production. You're not going in there to look cool. You're going in there to
Right.
pray. And you have to figure out what's important to figure out what you want to pray about. I mean, and sometimes that takes getting hit by the cosmic wizard stick. It's like and finding yourself in hell to realize what's important. But so and I know people that like to bring it on out, that they'll have lodges that last for hours and hours and hours. But just a good, concise lodge and how we do it, 4 songs, some prayers that go around where people say what they really want. And then also when the singing's happening, that you're encouraged to pray out loud while that's all happening so that you're not, people don't have to hear you. You can say whatever you want. So
Mhm.
the lodge itself probably take an hour and a half to 2 hours, all 4 rounds. It could be a little bit shorter, it could be a little bit longer, but really you go in, you pour, you have 4 songs, sing, you pray, and then you open the door, and then the air comes in. You're like, oh, dear God, oh, dear God. It's like I get out of the way of the door, let the air in. It's just like, and so that cool off comes, and this is a really cool part of the whole technology of this. This is a technology of the sacred, and when you're in there and you're praying and all that sweat comes out and the moisture and the medicines that are in there and the songs that are sang and the prayers that happen, that smoke and that steam comes out of that door when you lift it up, and it goes straight through that door to where the mound, the altar is right in front of the door, and then on the other side of the altar is the sacred fire, and the prayers go in a line out of that door over the sacred mound to get blessed, put into the sacred fire, and then get shot up to the sacred to be heard and answered and to be let go of.
That's thank you. That's the best answer I have ever had on what the sweat lodge is. No one has ever explained it to me like this. And I can see then it's this combination. There has to be an out of body experience that must occur when you're in there because
Mm-hmm,
you're letting go of the body and going into a higher self that's going to be able to handle that heat because you're not associating it completely that you're just a body. You're
mm-hmm,
becoming in touch with your soul or your spirit. Um,
mm-hmm,
so I want to move on now to a little bit about the Sundance. So I will get my 2 ceremony questions answered, and then we
sure.
can go on with some things about the Lakota people and about horses and Edgar Casey and some other things. So before we go to that, um, I've only seen like photos here and there of the Sundance ceremony, and I remember seeing like amazing, beautiful, unbelievable clothing and feathers, and looking at it and thinking, wow, I'd really love to go to this, but you just can't go to this. So this is for like I've been taken and embraced by a few different native cultures, and one were the Haida Indians up in Alaska, and
Mm-hmm,
the other was the Mongolian people, and the other is the Huichol in the mountains of Mexico. And I've been
mm-hmm,
involved with them for over 30 years, maybe about
mm-hmm.
36, 37 years. And I have a very deep involvement. But when it came to me getting involved here in our country, I mean, I had to go all the way to Alaska to get invited. But about the one than where I live here, I've never been invited into any other native, whether it's an event or a presentation or a conference or a show or a Sundance or a sweat lodge. I don't know if it's because I'm a white European and I'm 99.9%. There's nothing in there other than that. Yet I found these other cultures embracing me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I always just felt like I don't know what it is that they don't like me or whatever. I don't know if I'm too white. But I've always wondered what happens at the Sundance and
Mm-hmm.
this amazing group of people. And are they coming from all over the United States? The fact that I think it's two different things. Attending one and participating is two different things. So at first you attended one, then you
Mm-hmm.
participated. So if you could
Yeah.
explain a little bit about that, and then we can move on to Edgar Casey and the horses and the other parts of the Lakota.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and you're getting double hit in this. You're now invited to a Sundance too, if you would want to go.
I
Uh,
The listeners have heard this.
yeah.
I have witnesses. Okay.
Yes, yeah, and that's what it's here for. And a lot of the things too is it's and also why I had to be, validated through a Native American just to get into a sweat ceremony in prison. It's that is their most important sacred, ceremony to do, and they would get killed or persecuted if they got found doing it before 1978, and a lot of times, white people could come in as spies and to find out what they're doing. And it's just kind of
Uh-huh.
like they've protected that, also have had so much, trauma through it that they coveted it for quite some time. They did not want to share it with the white people, and that's totally understandable,
Absolutely.
and what the Lakota had started doing in the mid late 90s, it was a big cultural ceremony that they do themselves called the wiping of the tears of 7 generations. And that's 7 generations ago the colonists came from Europe and colonized and did all of the brutal things
Yeah.
that they've done to create the culture that we have now, which we're trying to find a balance with that. That's a whole nother conversation, but that's a big reason why that not many people of European culture or white people that have not been invited with it. But that's also why I found myself being, allowed to getting into it, because the wiping of the tears of the 7 generations is them letting go of their anger, letting go of their resentment, for these things, and understanding the only way that this beautiful earth, the grandmother earth, is going to thrive is if they share their knowledge and their ceremony. But that's not, hey, everybody come on in. It's like you got to get vetted, you got, like, I had to go through, in Blake, I had to go through prison. I had to go through getting, the cosmic interview from the human Lakota and then also the spirits, to be able
Hmm.
to know that I was invited to go just support at a Sundance. And now that during the wiping of the tears of 7 generations, they are letting that go, and they're allowing people to be able to come and support. And if the spirits, deem them worthy or necessary, that to be invited in with it, because that is the way that we're all going to be able to balance out the destruction that's happened to this planet and to the cultures, and be able to make that happen. So this just happened in the late 19 or the late 20th century, in the 1990s. They let that go, and just now that we're in 2025, more and more people that have shown interest, but more than that, have shown respect for it, have been allowed to be able to partake in it, to come and participate, what you call support. And this is happening from all around the world. I've been to Sundances where all cultures, all different languages, all different colors of skin, are coming to support. And also people are starting to get involved in Sundance. And this is a part of, prophecy, of the Lakota with the medicine wheel of the four sacred directions. That's also the four sacred races of black, red, yellow, and white. And one of the prophecies is when we get all those races into that medicine wheel, which is Sundance, you have an arbor, which is a circle, and it's got four different gates to the west, the north, the east, the south. And that's how it's choreographed, to how the sun comes up in the east and then sets in the west, and you're out there during the day, with the sacred tree out there doing that. And if one the prophecy kind of states that when you have all four directions, all four colors surrounded by that tree of life, that sacred tree of life, which is represented in all different cultures. And this is
Yes.
what that Sundance tree is. And through a process of ceremony, you go and you get a tree and you pray and you put tobacco down. The medicine man finds the tree, and then each person that is a part of the sun dancers, they take a swipe at it with the axe, and you're praying and you're asking it to help us. And you end up chopping down the tree that is found and that is agreed to be the tree of life for that ceremony. And everybody that's participating, you have little kids that are taking this huge axe and hitting it, praying to God and everything. It's just beautiful. It really brings the community of people together to put their collective prayer into that tree. And then you replant that tree in the middle of the arbor, which is the sacred circle of the four directions, and it's directly in the middle. And you'll usually will plant it deep down into the earth. You'll dig a large hole that goes down at least 3 feet into the earth, and you'll put a buffalo heart or a bear heart or a buffalo kidney, bear kidney underneath, and then you put the tree on top, and then you replant it into the earth. And through matter of ceremony and putting your prayer ties and prayer flags around that tree, which very representative of like up in the Himalayas with all the prayer flags and the colors. I mean, very similar technologies, the colors are spirits. The spirits represent colors. The spirits are colors. And the different directions that represent that, you have the tree that people have spent all year doing their prayer ties, which is just a little piece of tobacco, a piece of cloth. It represents one of the directions with a little bit of tobacco in the middle, and then you tie it, and you're praying into that tobacco and with the color to what those colors represent, either the northeast, southwest, and it gets much more in depending on which culture, of course, what those colors represent. But you're really tuning in that prayer into that tobacco and that color so that you can call the necessary spirits to answer your prayers. And you tie that once you have the tree planted in the middle of the arbor. Everybody puts their tobacco ties around the tree. The flag, which is just a larger, big tobacco tie, a big piece of cloth that you put a handful of tobacco into, and then you tie it with red string, and it has this huge tail, of a color. People dress this tree with all these beautiful sacred colors. It looks like something you'd see up in the Himalayas, and the wind is blowing it all over. Usually, you'll pick a tree that has a, uh, a, a crutch in it, so that it's going out. And so that tree gets planted just like the sacred tree of life. It is rooted in the underworld. It is all the way up to the celestial realms. It is representing also the middle human existence, third dimensional earth. So you have all three that have been prayed over with all these directions, all of the sacred prayer ties and prayer flags that are hanging off of it, that is just such a beautiful sight to see out there. And then you have the arbor, which is usually put together with either cedar or sage, making that sacred circle. And at each gate, they call them, of each direction, there's cedar or juniper that's coming up, and which represents the gate that the sun dancers will walk in to the gate, the west gate. In the morning, you go in the east gate, because that's the where the sun rises, and you're in there all day, fasting, no eating, no drinking water. That's the hardest part of it. But you have essentially a sacred circle arbor that is surrounded by sage that you go and handpick out in South Dakota. They do this all over the planet, but the Lakota, as the story goes, was given this technology from Creator and the spirits, and told how to do this to be able to hear their prayers and be able to bring help from the underworld, the celestial, and into the human world. So you have the sacred tree, the tree of life that has all the prayers on it. You have the circle around it that has the sacred medicines. And then for 4 days, 4 sacred days, you go in during the day and you dance around the tree while there's a huge drum on the outside where the natives are playing the drums. I'm a drummer as well with my music background. I love the drum. And
Mhm.
you have a huge drum, and you're beating on the drum, singing these ancient Lakota songs in the Lakota language. And so you're just going by that beat. Like, it's not some huge crazy dance. Like, especially when
Right.
you're fasting, it's like you're making sure to dance, and you're hitting your feet on the ground, either barefooted or in moccasins, and the earth is hearing your prayers. You're looking at the tree, the sun is beating down on you. It's like you're connected to all three levels in that, and you go through that over 4 days until you get out after the fourth day of putting all that in.
I have to say, it reminds me a little bit of, I don't know, I've spent a lot of time up in the mountains. I've gone 6 trips to the Huichols, and I've been there to the peyote ceremony twice and the
Mhm.
ceremony of the corn. I was the only white person at the ceremonies, but I've never had a full explanation because Huichol is their first language and Spanish is their second, and my Spanish isn't that great. But what I did get from it was that it's the 36 peyoteros are dancing in a circle, and it's something to do with the world. That they're not just doing this for them themselves, they're doing it for the world. And there's
Mhm.
something about the prayers and the singing, and it's the honoring of the peyote. In the ceremony, they honor the pine tree and the peyote, and other people cannot dance with the peyoteros, but all
Mhm.
the rest of the huichols or someone like myself, you dance in another circle. But the whole thing is to dance in the circle, and I didn't realize that, just like what you're saying, there's a certain step that goes with this peyote ceremony dance. It isn't just
Hmm.
people running around in a circle. There's a, and I'm not musical at all. I'm about as far, I'm not the whole other end of that spectrum. And but when I took my dad there, he was able to pick up the beat, and he was
Nice.
dancing the right steps of the dance. So I think that you're right in that also that the description of what you're saying about Sundance is similar to prayer and circular honorings of the four directions, and it happens in different cultures around the world.
Most definitely.
And
And
tying in the elements at the same time, the air, water, fire, and earth.
yes, yes.
And I think it's an honor to be invited to something like this. That's how I felt with the Huichol. I mean, I
Mhm.
felt honored. I don't take those things lightly. I always know I can't keep up with whoever's in charge about whatever it is, but I'm thrilled to have been invited, and and I think it's wonderful that people like you and I are sharing this on a podcast, because
Mhm.
there may be some people out there who've just heard the word Sundance, have no idea what it's attached to. And it's
Mhm.
very wonderful you were able to give them a really good description here of what is
Mhm.
going on. And I see that your interest and your experiences with the Lakota people have taught you so much.
Mhm.
Is there a few things you'd like to share that has been the most important knowledge that you've learned in being involved with these people? Or whatever you want to share, whether it's wisdom or knowledge or a story or anything about your involvement with the Lakota people.
Sure. I mean, with the Lakota people, it's one of the things I will say is, it's the most important thing is to be able to find out what is important for you, to be able to pray to bring that into this world. And what I've found through the Lakota people and the ceremony that we do is mainly it's about the intention that you bring to it. It's what you're praying for and what is important, because what Sundance is about, what all these ceremonies is about, it's for the people, it is for the planet, it's to make things better for everybody. It is not a praying for your own selfish exploitative ways. Like, what I've realized is the difference between the word pray with an A or the word pray with an E. If you're doing it for others, you're praying. If you are sacrificing yourself by fasting, by going into that arbor and piercing up in the tree, which that's another part of Sundance we could get into at some other point. But if there's an extreme sacrifice, and what you want, what you're sacrificing yourself for is to be able to help the greater good. This will all help you by doing that. But if you go in with the intention to prey with an E, prey on people, and you're trying to exploit others and to sacrifice them for your own good, you're going to get one hell of a lesson in hell.
Good explanation. I like that, pray and pray.
Yeah.
Very, very good description of this. So you've been accepted into the Lakota people. I mean, this is a very special thing. I feel the same way about being accepted into the Huichol. You can only go there by invitation. And I've been involved now for, as I said, over 30 years. So it's
Hmm.
a long-term, deep, I feel they're family for me. It's not, it's been that, but in the beginning, I didn't know the different things that were going on, and I didn't know what I was eating or what the ceremony was about. And I've learned through the years from finding out with other people or getting a better, translator, what actually was happening in some of the things that I was attending. I was just experiencing them, just experiencing it with no actual information.
Hmm.
And I prefer it that way,
Hmm.
because then I was there working on cancer. I had cervical cancer in my 30s, and I was with the Huichols, and a shaman was doing a cleansing on me and saw that I had something wrong in my cervix and said that I need to have, treatments, shamanic treatments, and I need to get this hard lump, as they described it, out of the body. And so I was given their cure, which I thought at the time was beef jerky or something. but really I was eating the dried blood of the deer that's
Mm,
caught sacredly. It has to have been a sacred killing of the deer. It's not just any deer.
sure.
And then the blood, the man who gave it to me was my friend's father, and he was over 100 years old, and he makes it. And so he's the one, he makes it. And he brought it to me, and I had to eat it with a little tortilla chip, and it was just powdered in a mortar and pestle. So that's why I thought it was some kind of meat powdered up. I didn't know.
Hmm.
I didn't find out till 2 years later that I was eating the dried blood of the deer. And when I had it, I had 4 days where my body felt like I was given every nutritional charge I could ever. I went from a depressed person that was told she only had a few years to live with cancer to a person that was like alive and full of the energy and the life force. And it changed my whole attitude to a positive thing. And we know that however that's caught and killed and made, the intention is what's being put into it, but not having any knowledge about it was really I liked doing it that way. If somebody said to me, "I'm giving you the dried blood of the deer," now I think I probably would have said no.
I was just thinking that. Would you have done it? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
You see that's a great example of this medicine man, praying with an A, like his sacrifice, the animal sacrifice, and being able. I mean, this is these types of things, which there's these types of things I can validate myself to where hearing it from you, it's like I've by now, looking back, being like, yeah, I've been able to realize those things have happened. And is it having that faith to just go along with it without knowing? And then
Hmm.
looking back and being like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I made that decision. It's like those prayers put into these substances from the earth that actually do create miracles in healing for people.
Yes. Well, when I had the surgery, the surgeon said, "I don't know what you did, but you did something with your Indians." This was right out of his mouth. And he said, because your tumor was supposed to spread to the other organs, because I waited almost a year before I had it removed. And he said, because I was determined to try and heal it without, medical intervention. And
Hmm.
so when I had it taken out, he said a skin formed around the entire tumor and it encapsulated it. And that's why it was not able to spread to the rest of your body.
That is
So he said,
beautiful.
I don't know what you did with them, but this is what happened. So whether we did or didn't, I can't tell you. I just know that I'm 70 now and I was 34 when that happened. So I've been here
Wow.
now for a long time and it hasn't come back.
That's
And
miracles.
it was and I credit the combination of Western medical removing and spiritual work with my Huichol friends and eating the dried blood of the deer. I mean, I
Hmm.
I don't like to, I have to feel that that's if I had only done one and not the other, I probably wouldn't be here, either one.
Hmm.
So I'm just grateful that I was able to do the combination of the two.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to go. We're about an hour, so we're a little over an hour into our show now, and I have a couple more things I'd like to talk about before we close in a little while. I want to talk about something you're involved in now that you're just forming and working on. We have your conscious effort awareness development services, but we have this work that you're doing with this wonderful man, Douglas Widow. And we just had him on a podcast prior to your podcast so that our listeners could get to know about him. And now we're speaking with you, someone who's actually working together with him and also who's experienced healing with these horses. And I have to tell you, when I was first talking to him, I was trying to imagine, how do you heal with horses? And I'm thinking that the people are riding on the horses. Instead, he tells me that they're blindfolded walking around with the horses. So that was a complete surprise to me. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate on what you learned from that experience and what you said here that there's a prophecy of the horses from the Lakota and the Edgar Casey perspectives, and that you've attended this horse equine healing experience. after at the end, if you could tell our listeners about how they can find out when you're doing these, or if they have an interest in this, how they would approach that. So I kind of wanted to talk about this new work that the two of you are doing together, and who it's for, and what it's about, and if it's something that anyone can do, or if it's just for adults, or what this is really designed for.
Sure, sure. No, and I'm very blessed to be able to be a part of this, and I'm very happy to share it. And I thank you for asking. You know, Douglas is such an amazing man. He's full-blooded Lakota out in the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, and also in Nebraska. And he's been working with horses since he was just a little kid. His grandmother, you know, which is one thing that's great about oral tradition and oral history, and the indigenous being able to get their oral histories given to them. His grandmother has given him so much information about this. Like us in the West, we don't know where we come from. Our history is so obscured; it's hard to find. It's almost like it was purposely erased. You know, and but with the people that actually have this intact, you know, I had just heard Douglas speaking about this because I had met Douglas after my journey getting out of prison and trying to find, okay, now I'm out of prison, where do I find a sweat lodge, you know? And through my connection of going through the routes, which wasn't always easy, it's always strange how your teachers can end up being people that, you know, you learn what you learn from them, and then you're like, oh, no, it's time to move on, you know, not going that way. You know, there's been plenty of people which I give a lot of gratitude for, but also pray for them with an A, you know, so that they can find their ways. But I found my way down to Mount Shasta, and then found my way to Sundance in South Dakota, and this is where I met my Sundance leader, Willis, who lives on the Rosebud Reservation out there. And then while I was dancing with him, Sundancing with Willis, he had brought Douglas out to our Sundance, and Douglas is also a Sundance leader. So those are the two Sundances. If you want to find yourself out in South Dakota around the summer solstice, that's where we'll be going, Gail. Uh,
Okay, you'll send me directions.
all right, yeah, yeah. And so meeting Douglas and going through this, you know, like they're very, very motivated, and their intention is pure. You know, they are the biggest hearted people, and just for them to be able to take me under their wing, you know, and teach me after, you know, dancing for 4 years. Like I didn't get connected with Douglas and do this until August of this year, and I just finished my fourth year of sun dancing, which is the Sacred Four. That's kind of the initiation into getting accepted by the Lakota officially. You know, it's like that's not just a 15-minute interview and you get the
No.
job. That's 4 years, blood, sweat, tears, no food, no water, driving from Oregon to South Dakota. Yeah, the cosmic merry-go-round. But with him and what we're doing, this was in August that the idea just had come for us to work together, because he's a mental health specialist. He works as a substance abuse counselor with the horses out in Nebraska and out in South Dakota. And these horses, really, just to be concise about it, these horses are in a different frequency. You know, they and I, from him explaining, just saying, you know, these horses, what they do is they balance left and right neurophysiology. You know, people that are too right brain heavy or too left brain heavy, you know, and figuring out, these horses can figure out where your trauma occurred, where your heart got broken, at what time in your life. Like with the horses, the left side of the horse will represent, you know, the left brain physiology, the right will represent the right. And the hind parts of them, so because this is what differs from the Western equine horse therapy, where you just go and you meditate around the horses, or ride them, or walk with them. You know, it's like you're around a tuning fork, like a sacred tuning fork. These are seventh dimensional beings, you know, and they're not like praying about, they just are. You know, they just are. And to be able to get yourself grounded, and that intention of finding what's important that you really want to heal, Douglas has the process where it's not Douglas healing people, it's the horses that are healing people. He just knows how to read the horse, and it's the horse whisper telepathy right there, you know. And I only experienced this firsthand in September, you know. And I had danced, and when we go and support Douglas's Sundance after ours, Douglas gets the pleasure and honor of coming and piercing us when we Sundance on the tree, which you get pierced up to the tree, so you're taking in all of the energy from the tree through your piercing. So Douglas, he relishes in cutting up the white man. So He always loves seeing his work. But so we go and do our Sundance, and he that was his introduction. He came out and just this Lakota guy that comes and pierces us up because Willis doesn't want to pierce his dancers. He's freaked out. That's too much for him to do. He's already doing enough. So Douglas and him work together, and they have an amazing friendship, and to get to know these guys. We go over and supported Douglas's Sundance, and he had said, you're in mental health. I said, yeah, and that's I'm a counselor, I'm a spiritual counselor, and being able to learn what I've learned and see, how much the need is for mental health and healing, and to bring the spiritual dimension and aspect in that I didn't have before I went to prison, and give that back to people. He knows so much knowledge from his grandmother and oral tradition about these things, and from his story about what his grandmother told him about the Lakota prophecy is that the horses and the buffalo, and this was back in times when human beings could speak with animals, could speak with the horse and the buffalo, but there was a cycle where the human beings were destroying the earth, and the plant nation and the animal nation had enough of the human beings and said, we're doing away with them. They were about to destroy the human species because they were destroying the earth. And so the horse and the buffalo had come together in this council of the plant and the animal nations, and said, give us one chance with the humans. We will help to raise their consciousness so that they can be in the present moment and learn the importance of this earth and learn the importance of love with each other. And so the decision was made by the plant and the animal nation. Okay, we're giving you the horse and the buffalo this chance to do that. So the horse had gone away back to the stars, said that we'll be back. And when we're back, we will help you and we'll be bigger and stronger than ever. There's a lot of things Douglas goes into with this, which are absolutely amazing. That just totally made my mind go out. But he says it much better than I do, and I know that you'll be able to get that out. So, but pretty much with that prophecy, now the horses are back, and you can see equine horse therapy retreats start to happen. And it's like I didn't know much about them, but then at Sundance, after going through this sacred ceremony and having this man who I gave complete trust to, to do what he does at Sundance, and going and supporting him and listening to him and knowing this guy has so much love to share with the world and so much knowledge, he said, yeah, come on, we'll check out the horses. I got him connected with somebody down in Eureka, California, and we had a retreat down there, and I got to go down there, and pretty much through a process of him praying and bringing in the ancestors and the horses being around. The horse, you will go up and you'll put your hand on the horse, and usually you start on the left hind, and that will signify, the horse, but you have to pray, and the horse has to accept that you're there for healing, and then the horse will essentially guide you around, either being on the left front shoulder, which represents adulthood, left-sided adulthood, the back hind on the left being back adulthood. Most of this for all of us, and for me, definitely being a right brain, it was on the back right hind, which represented as adolescence, younger childhood, adolescence, where some trauma happened, and you can look at it as a spell, because you can get down into what a spell actually is. A spell is just a lie that somebody's told you that you've believed, and you're
Mhm.
under that spell.
Mhm.
And that lie for me as it comes out is, it's not okay to be you. Why are you doing what you're doing? You need to do this. How dare you? For me to, and I took that spell on as an early child, and so as I was going up and down the horse, and the horse was kind of guiding and talking to Douglas, how to go over on this side, get back to that right hind. He said it was someplace in this time of your life where you were told this, and it's like immediately I felt this energy being coursed through me, and I just burst out into tears and just
Mhm.
started crying of release. And these horses, what they do is they'll eat hay and they'll drink water, and just like a shaman who takes energy off of a person, either
Mhm.
goes and throws up onto a fire or something, or takes it out, puts it back onto the earth. These horses will defecate or urinate after they do the healing with you, and take that energy out of you, give it back to the earth, therefore breaking the spell and being able to energetically push through you healing to where you understand it was just a spell. I mean, I got up after that, the huge emotional release of mine, and then was guided to go up to the adult right brain part of the horse, of where I'm at now, which is healed. And the horse looked at me and then turned around and gave me a hug with its
Oh.
neck and head. And I was just, oh my God. I
Oh.
just got the most warm feeling through my entire being, and it was just like, holy God. I look back at Douglas. He's just smiling. I'm like, you. You know, it's just like
Ah.
this. And the crazy thing was, is this happened to 99% of the people that were there. There was one person that was very much fighting their trauma, which that'll happen. They still got an understanding where they're at and what they need to work on, but there were people flinging emotions and crying like I have not seen, and I've done a lot of ceremony. You know, it's like these horses, I believe, are here to help break those spells of the illusion and the lies we've been told, to be able to heal and get us on a frequency with them to where we are in the here and now, and we realize how important life is and that we can work together.
So does he bring those horses? I was at a conference in Kansas in Council Grove where Native Americans used to meet for council
Hmm.
to speak with each other, and someone came and brought those kind of horses, and I thought they drive them around through states to bring them to do, and I don't know if it was the same kind. They just said they were therapy horses.
Hmm.
And so this might be different. They might be a different type of therapy than what we're talking about that Douglas is doing with you. Um, is that a special horse where he had, because some horses, have had trauma and you wouldn't want to be alone with them blindfolded in something because they may not be. So does he like take any random horse, or is it does he relate to the horse first and says, oh yes, this is a horse we can work with, or how does he pick the horses? Because it's a lot of horses.
Yes, and that's what he very much has to do and does. He's very familiar with the horses and things like that. And just like how you had spoken as well, the horses cannot have been abused and have trauma themselves. A big part of what these horses do is they mirror, or they, like an empath, they take on emotions from people, and they have to be strong enough in their own foundation to be able to take that on and then be able to get it out. And it's strange because you'll
Mm,
see this needs to be done with at least two horses. Four sometimes is the best. And for the sacred number four, they work together, take the energy off of each other.
mm,
And I mean, I got to see these horses working. Like when somebody was at the horse, they'd look and signal, and the other horse would defecate or urinate out in because it was taking the energy off of the horse to do that. And so, to answer your question, Douglas has four horses of his own out in South Dakota, Nebraska. We could, travel with those horses, but what I've been doing, and as I started the nonprofit CEDS, the acronym CEDS, and we're doing these therapy horse therapy retreats, like down in Eureka, where we had done one, which we're going to be scheduling one in Eureka for the springtime. We're setting up a couple out in Hawaii right now, setting a couple up in Bend, Oregon, one at the base of Mount Adams in Trout Lake, Washington. I literally cannot pick up the phone and call someplace where they're not super interested about this. And it's like, whoa, right on. We're working with some real spiritual force here. But that's always a
Hawaii.
common question about the horse, what we can do with that. And mainly
Mhm.
Douglas has to interview the horse and
Right.
needs to see, is this horse capable of doing this, And it's, of course, be good to have our own horses, but we don't want to put the horses through trauma by lugging
Schlepping
them
them
around
around.
everywhere.
Right.
So it's like, we can find horses in these existing places, and as long as they check out with Douglas and he has that connection and they tell them, I mean, because you have to ask them, just like when you go pick any sacred medicine, you lay tobacco down, you say, will you help me on our journey? And you'll
Right.
get a message, yes, we will. The horses will do that affirmatively with him, and he can kind of say, okay, this one's good for doing that.
Where in Hawaii, which island in Hawaii are you thinking of that? Because I can think of, I think it was Maui. Was that where they had all the horses? I can't remember. Uh, which
So,
island are you going to? The
so this is the big island of Hawaii near Kohala.
oh,
And this was a person I was going to school with that lives out in Hawaii, and she, we'd connected because we graduated together in May from CIIS, and we said we'll keep in contact, we'll see what's going on. And I told her about Sundance, but this was just in May. We didn't even have the idea for doing this horse therapy retreat, and how fast it's happened can only be credited to miracles, like with Douglas and I being like, okay, let's do this. It's like, okay, now we have it totally legit with the IRS, with the Secretary of State, and the city of which I live in. All these places are like, yes, yes, yes. Like, oh my God, I prayed too hard. Now I got a lot of work to do. Shit.
Right, there is the other, is
But
that the right brain you have to use for those things? I
well,
don't
the left brain is what's with
remember.
that. So a good thing I have the horses helping me to balance them both, because if not, I'd just be dancing around, talking to spirits. So, but I mean, this is all coming together, and there's two places on the Big Island near Kohala that I'm speaking with right now. We're putting the website in order, and a business proposal, which I'm getting the final details of that ironed out, because like all these places are just waiting for me to send those so that we can schedule them, and I want to make sure that people can get the information so that they can sign up with due time, because it's like Douglas and I are both like, let's do it now, let's do it next week. It's like, well, we need people to show up, so it's like we have to use the left side of the brains.
Right.
So
And then you
thank
can get
goodness.
testimonials from them that you
Hmm.
can put on your website for other people to know what changed or happened for them, just to have
Yes.
that kind of a healing with, I feel this with the animals we have in our home, that I know my dogs took on some of my illnesses and they end up with the same thing as me. And I'm thinking, how did they get this? I mean, it just feels like I'm sleeping with them every night. Somehow they're
Hmm.
absorbing some of my things, helping me to get along.
Most definitely, most definitely. And
So
oh, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just for the demographic, the people that the horses help, because it's very important that people do know this as well. It's anybody that feels that they have dealt with trauma in any retrospect, people that want healing, it works for, but it works for very deep traumas as well, and of course after this you want aftercare if you have your own therapist, but then also as being a spiritual counselor, and Douglas as well, and then my other Sundance teacher Willis, we're spiritual counselors. We have our practices to where we can give aftercare for that, but what we're targeting with our nonprofit is to do retreats out in the greater community, but then be able to go to Native American reservations, because this works wonders on Native Americans that don't have these resources. Be able
Right.
to bring that back for scholarship prorated to possibly free funds. Veterans, big one for veterans. Substance abuse, hopefully get into the prison systems, the rehabilitation centers for, and then a big one is the children. We want at-risk youth to be able to get this healing early on so that they can live their lives more fully. So I mean, this handles the whole demographic of the human species, going back to the prophecy of the Lakota. I mean, so there's nobody that it won't work for, and Douglas has had to explain to people too. It's not just the Native Americans this works for either. And then being able to see this in person, feel it myself, and see everybody that was there. It was people of all different. There was people from Asia. There was Native Americans. There was white people. I mean, everybody like
One.
got shattered, and then were be able to get on a path towards healing. Like some people have spent years, 20 years, and hundreds of thousands of dollars on psychiatry or psychology, and haven't got the message until
Or
seven
they
minutes
get
with
put on
Douglas.
medication, on drugs that actually they end up taking their life, and it's supposed to be drugs to prevent them from taking their life. But then the
Yes.
side effects say may cause suicide. So I find that also very amazing.
Yes.
So, did you ever see the movie Horseboy?
No, I have not seen that.
Okay, so that you should see that. That was
I write that down.
uh it's a film, it's a documentary that was done by two parents, a husband and wife, who
Hmm.
brought their autistic son to Mongolia, to a place that I've actually been to, but I couldn't get to the other side of the lake where the oldest shamans in the world live, what they call the original shamans. And they don't speak Mongolian, they speak their own language, and they live in teepees. And I'm saying 30 below zero, freezing weather in an area called Lake Hovsgol. And they brought their child there who they had never actually been able to play with, or so he was, he had quite severe autism. I don't think he spoke much. I forget it, but you'll see in the documentary
Hmm.
when they put this little 4 or 5 year old, I think maybe he was five or something, on the horse with they're called the reindeer shamans, if you want to look that up. Uh,
Sure, yeah.
when they put him on and they ride their horses, there are reindeers. They ride reindeers, and when you see the reindeer with the big horns and the saddle on him, when they put that child on the horse, not a reindeer, but on a horse, the child and the horse had such a communicative, connective experience, and it changed his life.
Mm.
And when they stayed for, I don't know, a week or whatever it tells you in the documentary, but when they went home with this child, it didn't take away his autism, but it opened up a channel for them to be able to communicate to him that they'd never had before.
Hmm.
And in the documentary, the father says, I played with my son for the first time ever. And what that was for him to be able to have that, something we take we take it for granted with our kids.
Hmm.
And the healing all had to do with the horse. And it's a wonderful documentary. And if Douglas Widow hasn't seen it. Maybe the two of you can watch it together or
Yeah,
suggest it to him. But very beautiful documentary.
that's
So
wonderful.
we're at an hour and a half now of our talk. So
Sure, yep,
this is where
yep,
we're going to wind down now.
sure.
I'm going to ask, first of all, I've really loved this talk with us today, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, as Douglas and I discussed, there was too much to tell in just this one podcast. So he
Mm-hmm.
wants to come back, and we'll do another podcast about the ghost dance and about things that he wants to share of his grandmother. Or maybe we can do a podcast with the two of you together. But I
Sure.
just feel like there's more stuff we can do that we can capture in these shows, but we can't do them all in one because you guys have too much to offer. So I just would like if you could tell two last things: the importance of acknowledging the ancestors, and any words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners in closing our show today.
Sure. Yeah. The importance of the ancestors, that's the part of what how I was speaking about the oral tradition, and being able to pass this on and how our history has been erased and why we feel so lost as a culture. The importance of the ancestors, which comes back to the horses as well, what Douglas will call it is the Tioshpe, and that means family. And a lot of what these traumas that we have that the horses will get back in order is putting the ancestral lineage in order and getting that broken chain back into order, because all of our ancestors create what we are now, physically, in many ways, and the ancestors are looking for us to do the things that they couldn't, either if it was because of cultural or societal or economic standards, all of the things that they couldn't change. It's up to us to be able to change into that. And one thing a lot of people don't understand is that if you just look into your ancestral past, even if it's just very recent, and you pray to deceased ancestors, these deceased ancestors have passed on to a different side to where they can see much more than we can. And you can
Mhm.
contact to them. And the only thing that it takes is acknowledgement, just knowing that they're there, or at least saying, I love you. If you're there, just I pray to you, this will come through in your dreams. It will come through your own thoughts. Where did I get that thought? It's like your ancestors, the ancestors, and it doesn't even have to be your biological ones too. I mean, as a human species, and the word Mitakuye in the Lakota means all my relatives.
Mhm.
All my relatives is everything. And you pray to your ancestors just simply by acknowledging their existence. They're there. It's like they're around us, you right now, me right now. And for most people, they're just like, gosh dang it, just acknowledge us, we'll help you. All you have to do is acknowledge them and then put your awareness out. They'll plant those thoughts in your head. They already are. You're just not noticing that they are, and that's where it's coming from. Your dreams, they may come in very strange shapes and forms, but if you just look into them and see what that's doing, even if it's a hard lesson, it's trying to heal that broken chain of lineage so that you don't feel so lost, so that you enjoy the planet that you're living on, and that you can help others to do the same.
Great. I always feel like the other thing is that I always am grateful for them, or I want to, and I'm thankful. And I always just talk out loud and just say, well, if you were here right now, Dad, look at this, you know?
Mhm.
I always feel like I can actually verbally just also like say something to the ancestors.
Mhm.
They may be hearing or whichever it is. It might be telepathic or it might be outside verbal, but having their support is just the most important. It's very, very important thing for navigating our life because
Mhm.
they came before us. And I feel like our American culture kind of tries to wipe out the old people,
Yeah.
and before they become ancestors.
Mhm.
And that's really who the people we really need to be around is the wisdom of the aging. So
Absolutely.
what last words of wisdom would you like to share with our listeners, and anything that you would like to say, or if there's a spot where they want to be contacted? Otherwise, I will put things on the description of your email or whatever you'd like as far as a place for listeners to contact you. But if there's anything you
Sure.
want to share now on the show, you're welcome to say any sites or anything.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Gail. It's been such an honor. It's so great meeting you, out in San Rafael, helping Professor Krippner and being able to get here right now. It's like that dude's a cosmic being as well. Do not want to discredit anything that elder has to say. He's an amazing person, amazing man, a good friend. And as far as getting a hold of us, I am looking forward to getting that website out. Anybody that's interested in any of these ways of healing, which one thing about the horse therapy is that's an open door and an invitation to come to a sweat lodge. That's an open invitation to come to a Sundance. But as our sacred vow to the Chinoopa, the sacred pipe, and to the Sundance, we don't charge money for that. You don't charge money. If anybody wants to come to a sweat lodge, we do that after the horse therapy. We do that at our retreats in the evenings, but that's community. Whoever wants to come to that, free
Mhm.
of charge. And then whoever wants to go to a Sundance to support after that, that's your own gas money on getting out there and bringing food to support. None of that is charging. So I mean, that's another amazing open door that these things do. And to start with that and knock on my door, email me anytime. I'm here for that, and I can give the links to the website as it's getting constructed and more of this comes in to more comes to the surface as we have retreats that we're starting here in mid December and then in January, and then we'll be going for probably the rest of my life and Douglas's life and beyond that. But
So
the
could you share your emails for the people who maybe aren't watching on YouTube or looking at the description? Maybe they're listening on Spotify or
Sure.
Google Podcasts. So if you could just say it slowly so they can write it down.
Absolutely. The email is ELLISAMSARA@gmail.com. If you want to think about it, my middle name is Ellis, and my pseudo name is Ellis Samsara. Samsara being the sea of birth and death and life, rebirth. So it's Ellis Samsara with only one S connecting Ellis and Samsara @gmail.com. And for the words of wisdom, I just say what has helped me the most is really seek into what's important, try to tend to that with love and affection, and follow through on getting to places that have resources to help you to find what's important, to be able to tend to that and pray on it with an A.
Thank you so much. So in closing, I want to say how much I've enjoyed being with you this week and being with Douglas Widow. And I hope our listeners enjoy this as much as I have. And I want to thank my son Richard for producing my show. And I want to thank my daughter Nancy for posting us on all those different sites. You can find us on Google, Spotify, YouTube, etc. I want to thank our listeners for liking, sharing, subscribing. And I want to thank my husband for always writing the description for me so that it sounds really good when you read it. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, listeners. Remember, share your stories because stories can heal. Bye.